I have run the harvest 311 times. I know the number, because I logged every one of them myself, in the clinic, under the clinic. In the room, none of our donors ever see twice. By the 311th, I thought I understood exactly what a human body does when you take collagen from it, without asking the nerves for permission first. I was wrong about that, and I want to write down how, before the council orders this file sealed. We came to this world the way you'd expect if you'd ever read one of your own cheap paperbacks about it. Quietly, patiently, wearing skins we grew instead of ones we stole. The Ilvain frame doesn't tolerate your air for long without an organic sleeve over it, and a sleeve needs feeding. Collagen, mostly. Structural protein. Harvested clean. Bound while it's still live tissue and not yet scar. We built a donation clinic upstairs. Blood drives, tissue banks, the kind of place your neighbors walk into with their sleeves rolled up and walk out of with a bandage and a coupon for orange juice. Downstairs is where the real work happens. Sedated, always. A donor who isn't screaming is a donor whose collagen binds properly, and a donor who's asleep never screams. That had been the rule since the first harvest team came through the gate. Sedation first, always. Then Tesserol, in materials science, ran her numbers on the last quarter's failures and came to my office with a face I'd learned to read as trouble. 31% of our recent grafts were rejecting at the molecular seam, she said. The compound we used to keep a donor under was cross-reacting with the collagen at a level we couldn't screen for in advance. Sedation was killing our yield. Her proposal was simple, and it turned my stomach the way only elegant things do. Run one harvest without the compound, get clean tissue, uncontaminated, and see if the seam held. Just one, then we'd know. I asked for a volunteer instead of a random pull from the donor list, because even I have limits. And recruitment found one within a week, a man named Walton Hale, 58 years old, who'd been giving blood at our upstairs clinic since before I was assigned to this enclave. He had a bad hip and a worse marriage, and he told the intake officer, in the recorded interview I've watched 11 times since, that he didn't mind needles and he could use the money. He did not know what he was volunteering for. None of them ever do. I want that on the record too. I brought him down myself. He lay on the table without being told twice, hands folded over his stomach, like a man settling in for a nap he wasn't going to get. And I explained, as much as our disclosure protocols allow, that this procedure would not include the standard sedative. He asked if it would hurt. I told him it would hurt more than anything we'd done to him before. He nodded, said all right then, and asked if I minded if he kept talking through it, because he did better with something to focus on besides the ceiling. I said that was fine. I said it because I did not expect him to keep talking for very long. We opened the readout above the table. The same telemetry rig we run on every harvest, tracking nerve signal cascade in real time, a soft blue lattice that lights up gold where pain response crosses threshold. On a sedated donor, it stays a flat, sleeping blue the whole procedure. On an unsedated donor, in every species record we hold going back 400 years of contact, it should have gone gold in the first 90 seconds and stayed there, spiking hard enough that Tesserol's team would have had their data, and we would have ended the harvest early, out of basic procedural mercy. I made the first incision at 11:40 by my own clock. Walton Hale said, "There it goes," in the flat voice of a man noting rain starting outside a window, and kept telling me about a truck engine he'd rebuilt in 1987. The readout stayed blue. Tesserol thought the rig was faulty. She had her technician, Orun, run a live calibration check against baseline while I was still mid-harvest, hands inside a conscious man, waiting for the gold to arrive so we'd know to stop. Orun confirmed the rig was reading true. Whatever was moving through Walton Hale's nervous system, it was not registering as anything our 400 years of contact had ever called pain threshold. He kept talking. He got to 1991, and a transmission he'd rebuilt for a neighbor's truck, and somewhere in there his voice tightened, not the register climbing, just a small catch, like a man remembering something instead of a man in agony, and he said, "Go on and finish it. I'd rather you finish than stop halfway," and I realized I had been the one who'd slowed my hands, not him. Orun ran the calibration a second time at the 15-minute mark, because by then, he'd stopped trusting his first result, and started, I think, doubting his own eyes instead. He fed a control pulse through the rig from a separate donor's archived scan, watched it spike gold exactly where the model said it should, then swung the readout back to Walton Hale and watched it settle back to that same patient blue, like a pond after a stone. He didn't say anything. He just looked at Tesserel, and Tesserel looked at me, and none of us said anything either, because there wasn't a protocol line for what you say when the machine keeps insisting the man on the table is telling the truth. I asked him once, near the 20-minute mark, purely to hear him answer, whether it hurt. He said it did, plainly, the way he'd say the weather was cold. He said hurting wasn't the same as it being a problem, that he'd broken the same hip twice on a loading dock years back, and walked it off both times, because there'd been a truck that needed unloading before shift change, and a man learns the difference between pain, that's information, and pain that's an emergency. He said this one felt like information. I had no answer for that. I don't have one now. I finished it. 40 more minutes. The readout crossed into a pale amber twice. Briefly, the closest it came to gold the entire time. Both times when I was closest to bone. Never higher than that. Never anywhere near what the models required to explain a man lying still and lucid through what I was doing to him. When it was done, I closed him properly, better than protocol required, and Tesserel had already left to run the numbers on the graft. I sat with Walton Hale for 11 minutes, while the local anesthetic we finally allowed took hold, and he asked me, conversationally, whether I thought his transmission story was a good one, or whether he'd rambled too much. I told him it was a good story. It was the only honest thing I said to him that day. The graft held. Tesserel's compound theory was correct. The seam bound clean, better than any sedated harvest we'd run in 2 years. She was satisfied. She wanted to schedule a second unsedated trial within the month. I refused, and when she asked why, given the yield, I told her what I am telling you now, that I had spent 310 procedures believing sedation was a mercy we extended, so pain wouldn't compromise our data, and the 311th had shown me it was never the pain we were managing. It was our own certainty. We had built 4 centuries of harvesting doctrine on the assumption that a conscious body under a blade behaves like every other conscious body we'd ever opened, and one donor, with a bad hip and a transmission story, had sat through it reading, as barely more distressed than a man getting a filling. I filed the incident as an equipment anomaly, because the truth would have ended my career and possibly the Enclave's charter, and because I did not fully understand yet what I was protecting them from knowing. I understand it now, writing this down for whatever review board eventually reads it. It isn't that Walton Hale was unusual. Recruitment pulled his file afterward, cross-referenced him against 6 other donors flagged for procedural calm, going back a decade, and found nothing that marked him as exceptional among his own kind. No training, no condition, no history that would explain it to a species that catalogs everything. He was, by every metric his own people use, an ordinary man who fixed engines and gave blood for gas money. Which means the line on that readout was not an anomaly. It was baseline, and we simply had never gone deep enough, into enough of them, to find it before. We closed the unsedated program within the quarter. Officially, it was a cost and liability decision. I wrote most of that report myself, and I made sure it said nothing about the readout, or the flat blue line, or the 11 minutes I sat holding a bandage against a stranger's hip, while he asked me, gently, whether I'd enjoyed the story. We are still up there, in your donation clinics, in our borrowed skins, taking what we need in small, careful amounts from people who never learn what any of it costs us to keep taking it. I used to think the danger in this world was in what we might do to you, if we were ever discovered. I no longer think that is the danger worth writing down.